Achilles knew the price on Troy's sand: undying glory, an early death, and no return home. He could still leave the war, cross the sea, grow old, and disappear from memory. Then Patroclus died wearing Achilles' armor, and every peaceful future suddenly became impossible to imagine. Grief turned the road toward fire, fame, and an early grave into his only road. This is not an invincible hero chasing victory through another battle outside Troy's walls. It is rage turning prophecy into a decision until triumph becomes the final thing he can afford. Achilles was the son of Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, a sea goddess. But even that divine lineage belongs to the world of Greek myth rather than recoverable history. For later audiences, that made him both blessed and condemned. Close enough to divinity to be famous, never close enough to escape mortality. The city we call Troy existed at Hisarlik in modern Turkey, yet no excavation can prove that Achilles stood beneath its walls or that Homer's 10-year war happened exactly as the poem tells it. What survives is a legend powerful enough to outlive the Bronze Age world that may have helped inspire it. In Homer, Achilles is already the greatest fighter among the Achaeans, young, swift, beautiful, and frighteningly aware of the honor due to him. Later storytellers added tales of a childhood with the centaur Chiron, a disguise on Skyros, and a mother trying to hide him from war. But Homer gives us something sharper. A man at Troy who understands that greatness is not a gift, but a bargain with death. By the time the Iliad begins, the Achaean expedition has been camped before Troy for 9 years, and its kings are no longer bound by purpose so much as pride. The siege has become a machine that consumes treasure, captives, alliances, and finally the men who were meant to command it. When Agamemnon is forced to surrender his own captive woman, he takes Briseis, an enslaved woman Achilles had received as a war prize, to replace his loss. For Achilles, the insult is not private jealousy. It is a public declaration that the commander can strip even the army's greatest warrior of his honor. He refuses to fight, calls on his mother, and watches the Greek position collapse without him. When Agamemnon later offers treasure and apologies, Achilles remembers the two futures Thetis once revealed: a long, obscure life at home, or brief life and undying renown at Troy. He does not yet march back into battle, but the choice now hangs over every ship, every funeral pyre, and every man still fighting in his absence. Without Achilles, Hector drives the Trojans toward the Achaean ships, while wounded Greek leaders can only watch the line bend and the camp begin to burn. The poem refuses to make this glorious. Achilles' anger protects his pride, but it also leaves ordinary fighters to die for an argument between kings. From his tent, Achilles can hear the cost approaching, but anger convinces him every loss still belongs to somebody else, until flames reach the ships and force the war into his doorway. Outside, wounded men pass shattered shields while their leaders wait for Achilles to return. Every burning plank turns a personal quarrel into disaster for thousands of men who never chose it. Then Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, comes to him in tears and begs for the Myrmidons to be sent into battle wearing Achilles' unmistakable armor. Achilles agrees, but gives one command that will decide everything: drive the Trojans from the ships, then return, and do not chase glory beneath Troy's walls. The sight of Achilles' armor changes the battlefield at once, because the Trojans believe the man they fear most has returned. Patroclus leads the Myrmidons forward, saves the ships, and turns panic into pursuit as Trojan fighters scatter across the plain. Myrmidons force a path through smoke as sea wind carries ash across the beach. For one brief, terrible moment, he becomes the image of Achilles, the same bronze, the same horses, the same promise of unstoppable force. Patroclus is not merely chasing conquest. He is trying to finish the rescue before the army realizes how far one borrowed identity can carry a man past safety and toward another's fate. But victory intoxicates him, and he ignores the order to come back once the ships are safe. He presses toward Troy itself, where Apollo strikes him, strips away his protection, and leaves him exposed amid the chaos. Euphorbus wounds him first, then Hector delivers the killing blow and takes the armor that had made Patroclus seem invincible. The news reaches Achilles at the shore, and the strongest man in the Greek army collapses beside the ships, covering his face in dust and crying out like someone already half dead. The camp falls silent, afraid to touch his grief. He had withdrawn to defend his honor, yet the person he valued above all others has died wearing the armor Achilles gave him and pursuing the victory Achilles wanted. Thetis rises from the sea to mourn with her son, but she also warns him that Hector's death will bring Achilles' own death close behind. Achilles accepts the warning because Patroclus' loss has made a long life feel empty and delay feel like betrayal. The god Hephaestus forges new armor for him, including a shield that holds an entire human world. Cities at peace, cities at war, harvests, weddings, law, dance, and death. Achilles steps back into battle wearing that world on his arm, even as he chooses the violence that will take him out of it. Achilles returns like a disaster the Trojans thought they had survived, driving them from the ships and across the plain with a fury that no commander can control. His return gives the Greeks hope, but to the people running before him, hope has the face of a man who has stopped caring whether he survives. Every step sends soldiers stumbling toward the gates, convinced no shield can slow him now. Homer shows the cost. The river chokes, and Achilles becomes an embodiment of war. Hector remains outside Troy while his parents beg him from the walls to come inside because a prince who abandons his city may live, but he cannot keep his honor. Two men bound by the same brutal code now move toward one another, each understanding that the other's death will decide what kind of name survives the war. When Hector finally sees Achilles advancing, even Troy's greatest defender runs, circling the city walls 3 times while the gods watch a human terror no god can truly erase. From the walls, each circuit seems to pull the city tighter around its own fear. Achilles pursues him without rest, and the chase makes the truth cruelly clear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the moment fear has nowhere left to go. Athena, disguised as Hector's brother, tricks Hector into stopping and facing the duel he can no longer avoid. Hector asks for an agreement that the winner return the loser's body, but Achilles refuses, too consumed by Patroclus' death to imagine mercy. Hector's spear misses. Achilles finds the gap at the throat beneath Hector's armor, and Troy's defender falls in the dust before his parents' eyes. As Hector dies, he warns Achilles that Paris and Apollo will kill him. Achilles hears the prophecy and answers that he will meet fate when it comes. Achilles ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it toward the Achaean camp, an act Homer presents not as clean heroism, but as grief and rage made horrifyingly visible. For days, The greatest warrior in the story cannot stop punishing a dead enemy, because defeating Hector has not brought Patroclus back, and cannot undo what he has done. Then Priam, Hector's aged father, enters the enemy camp at night and kneels before the man who killed his son. He asks Achilles to remember his own father, and in that impossible encounter, Achilles sees not a king to destroy, but an old man who will also lose the child he loves. The two men weep together, one for Hector and one for Patroclus, Peleus, and the fate Achilles knows is waiting beyond the poem's final page. Achilles returns Hector's body, granting Troy time for burial, and the Iliad ends not with the city's fall, but with a funeral and a fragile act of mercy. The Achilles who began as the hero of unmatched strength ends as something more unsettling. A man who wins the glory he was promised and learns that glory cannot heal grief. The Iliad never shows his death, the wooden horse, or Troy's destruction, because its deepest subject is not conquest, but the rage that turns human beings into strangers to themselves. That is why the final image is two enemies sharing tears in a tent, while war still waits outside. The only victory either side can carry beyond the ruined city and its dead. Later tradition says Paris and Apollo killed Achilles. Storytellers called his heel fatal. Whether the fatal wound was arrow, ankle, or another version of the legend matters less than what the story was trying to say. Even the greatest warrior had a vulnerable place, and no armor, divine parent, or immortal song could protect him from the price of the future he embraced. Achilles chose a short life with an undying name, and more than 3,000 years later, we still remember him not because he escaped death, but because he never did.